Hi everyone, and welcome to a new Tech Talk. And today's Tech Talk is going to focus on mobile testing fundamentals. And I'm going to start by providing a basic mobile testing overview, which application types are there, and then I'm going to talk about how to actually build a testing strategy that covers all the key ingredients, if you like, for your testing activities. And later on, I'm going to talk about the differences between testing on virtual versus real devices and what's my recommended practice, because this is something that comes up often. Then we will conclude with a recorded demo of mobile application testing, mostly focusing on manual testing, but also connecting the testing into an Appium desktop through the Perfecto cloud. So let's start. When you look at mobile application types that are out there today, that exist today, you look at native applications which are specific to iOS and Android. When you develop an Android application, you usually generate an APK, an Android package, and this is the binary that you want to test. Traditionally or typically, you would test the application using either Appium test automation framework or the Espresso from Google. On iOS, you're going to generate an IPA file. That's the binary for iOS applications. And similarly to Android, you will be testing the Appium, again, test automation here using the Appium framework, but also you can test it through XUI test. It's important to mention that Appium underneath relies on Espresso and UI Automator, and for iOS, it relies on XUI test. A second type of mobile application is the hybrid application. Hybrid application is a bit different than the native one because it includes or consists of a native application wrapper that is iOS or Android independent. And this is what gives the application access to all the operating system specific capabilities. It's an installable app through the App Store or Google Play, but it also consists of a web content ingredient that makes the application a bit more similar across platforms. You know, when you compare native and hybrid, native application can have very unique design and functionality across iOS devices and Android devices. When you look at hybrid application, while they do have an operating system independent native wrapper, which is Android specific and iOS, the hybrid or the web content that is installed and runs across these two application types are consistent. Hybrid applications are also supported through the Appium test automation framework, so you can use Appium to test both native applications as well as hybrid applications. A third application type is the web application, and that's a pure web, can be JavaScript or other, that is being developed, but can be accessed through the mobile native browsers, whether it's Chrome or Safari or Firefox. This is pure web application that can be tested through Selenium. The fourth one, which is emerging, is Progressive or PWA. Progressive app, it's kind of an installable web link that is specific to iOS and Android. You can think about Instagram.com or Twitter.com. These are all progressive web applications that when you access them through the Android device or the iOS device, you can create a shortcut to these websites, and then you actually generate an installable application on the device itself without really going through the App Store or the Google Play. So again, Progressive does not go through any of the app stores in comparison to the hybrid and the native apps, and it has web-specific content, but also can enjoy the mobile operating system capabilities such as the sensors, the storage, and other like the contact list and other device-specific capabilities, the microphone, for example. So Progressive is an emerging mobile and web application type. It's not installable, and it's the fourth application type that runs on mobile devices that you want to be familiar with when thinking about mobile testing. Just a snapshot of where we are in the mobile industry in 2020. Obviously, Android is a fragmented platform with over 6 different operating system families, stock OS families, with the leading one being Android 8 and 9. Um, Android 10 is closing the gap, but still does not lead the market from a coverage perspective. iOS and iPadOS, on the other hand, are a bit more consolidated, with iOS 13 being the majority of the market. iOS 12.4.6, which is the latest and end of life platform from Apple, also has around 20% market share, so it's quite important to test on. And the next version of iOS 14, which will come later on, will obviously add to the coverage testing consideration. As we do this tech talk, obviously Android 11 is in an advanced beta version right now, so Google Pixel devices and emulators of Google Pixel can get this version already for trial and beta testing, if you like. So Android 11 is just around the corner. When you're testing mobile applications, especially for Android, you want to be familiar with these important insights. So when you're testing mobile applications on Android, you do have, as I showed you in the previous slide, the stock operating system version, which are Android 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, which is coming up. And these are the Google-based platforms that are being released. However, when you think about the OEMs, the device manufacturers, they are taking these stock versions and customizing them and adding more functionality, changes, built-in applications, and much more. So just look at this table to see the different variations of custom operating systems that are based on the different stock OSs from Google, highlighting, Samsung Galaxy S7, which is still quite popular. It's running on TouchWiz UI, while the latest Samsung Galaxy S20 is running One UI 2 operating system version. S8 is running on One UI. And if you look at other versions or platforms like Huawei and LG, you see that they also have their unique custom OS. And this is why it's quite important to test on real devices across these different custom OS versions, because they simply are different by nature. These are different binaries of the operating systems that can behave, perform, and function differently across these devices, and especially on your applications. So if you want to draw a very high level test automation or testing plan for your mobile app, these are the fundamentals or building blocks that you want to check in your plans. So obviously the functional testing should take a lot of focus and attention from your test automation and test engineers as well as developers. You want to make sure that you're covering all the business flows, all the different UI elements, testing across landscape and portrait, testing across languages if you support multi-languages, testing across different platforms. I've shown you in the previous slides the different market coverage. So you want to make sure that you are covering your application testing across different devices and operating system versions. Next, and not less important, you want to cover the real environment conditions. Your end users obviously perform or consume your apps in real networks, in real environments, on real devices, and your app is just one app together with many others, at least 10 or even more, that are running in the background in parallel. So this is why you want to make sure that you are testing your application with varying network conditions, not just Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, 5G, with packet loss, without packet loss. You want to inject interruptions like calls, alerts, security pop-ups, text messages coming in while your users are consuming your application, to know and understand if they are causing any crashes, resource conditions or resource conflicts and stuff like that. You want to move your app to the background and foreground and see how it performs with other applications, especially in today's world when you have smarter devices such as the foldables that supports 3 apps running in the foreground. You want to make sure that your app, especially on Android 10 and above, can handle these different foreground and background changes. Obviously, test your app across different gestures. If your app also supports things like force touch, include force touch testing to get like kind of a right-click menu of your app with a subset of the capabilities. So these are the real environment condition bucket for your mobile testing strategy. And the final one, which is important, is the non-functional testing. You want to make sure that you are testing for security, either through static code analysis or other automated methods, code coverage mechanisms, and stuff like that. You want to test for accessibility. iOS and Android are supporting a lot of accessibility solutions. You want to make sure that you are covering accessibility on your native and hybrid applications as well. You want to make sure that you are covering non-functional performance and availability testing, how your application performs when there is load on the backend, and how your end users are seeing the behavior on the front end, on the client side, which is the smartphone or tablet. You want to also, of course, test the APIs and other third-party services that are being used by the applications, things like voice commands, bots, whatever you are using in the app, connection to third parties like Facebook and other social media also needs to be tested mostly through the APIs, but also you can test them from the UI as well. Need to do the balance based on the test pyramid. So this is a nice, summary of a test plan that you want to make sure that you have in front of you when you're building a test strategy for your mobile applications. If you have a mobile application today, do a check, like a checklist, see that you're not missing any important fundamentals here. If you have questions on a specific line or item here, feel free to reach out to me or to Perfecto. We can help you check mark all of these options. Last but not least in this tech talk is the differences between real devices and virtual devices. So real devices are obviously quite important. You have seen the differences between custom OS and real OS, the real environment conditions and sensors and stuff like that. So obviously testing and releasing based on real devices is a must. You also want to make sure that you are using virtual devices perhaps in early stages of your application development cycle. You want to use virtual devices when you want maybe to do a design change in the UI and see how it looks on a very small subset of the devices. But as you scale your testing and do a lot of parallel testing, you want to see the real user experience across multiple real devices. So I've summarized, just four key considerations or differences between real and virtual devices. The first one is, and I just proved it to you a few slides ago, operating systems under test are different across real devices. You have the stock OS and you have the custom OS. When you look at virtual devices, they only run on the Google stock operating system versions, and this is a limitation. Second, when you're using the real devices, you're using the real device hardware, which is the sensors, the memory, the CPU, everything that is coming with the chipset on your smartphone or tablet. When you are running on emulators and simulators, iOS simulators and Android emulators, the environments are different. They are using the PC resources, your desktop, Mac or Windows machine resources, which are not really reflecting the end user experience. Okay. There are also inconsistent feature support across iOS and Android versus real devices. For example, you won't get App Store support, MDM support, security notifications, cellular networks, and more on virtual devices across Android and iOS, which you get on real devices. So test coverage is definitely something that needs to be in front of you when you're doing this balance between virtual and real devices. Also, you have a long DevOps pipeline, so there is room to accommodate both virtual and real devices across your different device application lifecycle. Again, early stages is the most recommended for virtual devices. As you mature your application development lifecycle, move to real devices. On the right hand of this slide, I actually showed you what's happening on my smartphone when I'm using a navigation application. Look at how many different notifications, real user conditions, multiple apps running in the background, battery which is not full, and many more. These are all happening on a real device. Try mimicking this environment on an emulator or simulator. It's almost impossible, and it's not going to be the same no matter what. So this is why, again, as you mature your application development lifecycle, focus on testing on real devices. Again, virtual devices have the role earlier in the cycle. What I've created for you guys is kind of a nice, I would say, summary of the famous testing pyramid when I've placed the real versus virtual devices in each of these stages. So when you're doing unit testing per code commit and post code commit, you can actually definitely use through your developer triggered testing on emulators and simulators. Doing the integration testing, you start mixing with the virtual devices also real devices, and as you climb up into the end user experience testing, UI testing, performance and availability testing, and also exploratory testing, this is the room which you need to focus only on real device testing, including production monitoring, so you get the full end user experience and the real quality visibility into what's going on. So now I'm going to run a very short demo that I've recorded within the Perfecto Cloud to give you a feeling on how testing with Perfecto looks like. Let's do some basic manual and also connect Perfecto into an Appium desktop for automation purposes. But again, let's start with some manual testing fundamentals. So with Perfecto Cloud, once you're connecting to the specific cloud, whether it's a private cloud which is dedicated to you or a public cloud, you have the option to launch either an Android device or an iOS, or actually both. I've already loaded a Samsung Galaxy S10e smartphone that is now on the screen, as you can see it. And this device can be used by any of you like it was in your own hands. You can do any gestures on this device. You can swipe, double tap, whatever thing that you can do with your device in hand, you can do in the cloud on this Android device. You have additional capabilities. For example, you can look at the Android device capabilities. Some of them can be used for your Appium test automation in different languages, Java, JavaScript, Python, Ruby, and so forth. Some of them can be useful for your other activities in testing. Among the different capabilities that the Perfecto Cloud supports for mobile testing, we have launching, installing an application, whether it's native or hybrid, injecting an image if you have applications that, like banking ones, that you want to check a deposit, do a validation of a check deposit into your banking app, you can do it through this capability. You have authentication user fingerprint. You can change location of the device. I can actually look at this device and change the location of this device to be in the United Kingdom. Okay, I can insert the location, and now this device behaves as it was in the UK. Okay, this is very important capability, especially if you want to test different user conditions. In addition, if you have an application that uses audio like Siri and other audio capabilities, you can inject an audio file into the device and use it for your testing purposes. You can also use network virtualizations for devices and applications that uses the network conditions and you care about user experience validation. You can change network conditions through preset profiles, like you can see here in this long list, or you can actually customize a network profile with specific latency, packet loss, and bandwidth for your specific testing. So this is also important, network virtualization. You can also rotate the device, move from landscape to portrait, and vice versa. Okay, so these are few of the capabilities that you can do for your application testing. Let's take one application. Okay, I'm starting with Android and then I will switch to iOS. So let's launch the calculator app. Okay, so currently, as you can see, this app is in the foreground. What I can do right now, I can do, basic testing like manual calculations, but I can also take this device, okay, using its session ID that you can see here. That's the only thing that I need, including my security token, to connect it to the Appium desktop for my mobile test automation. So once I'm starting the session and I provided the session ID and the security token, I can immediately see the device on my Appium desktop and I can start interacting with the app, automating script and using different objects. For example, if I click on this button, okay, you can see here that the accessibility ID is clear, and I can tap on that and it will send a command clear to the device. I can do additional things. I can actually start recording a script in different languages and move it to the IDE. So Perfecto Cloud supports both manual testing and automation connecting through the Appium desktop, or if you want to use within Android Studio or Xcode the XCUI test or Espresso, it's also possible with Perfecto. So this is the Android environment. Let's now look at iOS. iOS, I have an iPhone 11. I can do exactly the same things, swiping, doing any gestures that I can think of. This is the real iPhone 11 device running on iOS 13 based in the US in our data center. And these are the desired capabilities. Again, I can use these in my Appium scripts. And everything that I mentioned earlier on my Android device, I can do here. I can inject Face ID if I have an app that uses face recognition for authentication. I can set a different location for the iPhone device. And I can do a bunch of additional activities like rotation of the device, and so forth. Same like in the other example, I can look at which applications are currently installed on the device and easily launch them. So for example, I can launch the GarageBand and start doing some testing on this app. I can check that, when I click on share, I will be moving to the next screen. So this is with regards to the GarageBand application. Okay, I will click on home and rotate back the screen. So this was, a very brief demo of the Perfecto Cloud testing both manual and connecting to the Appium desktop for automation, your Samsung and iPhone devices, iOS devices. As you can see here in the Perfecto Cloud, we have a large set of real devices that you can use for your testing in parallel and as part of your automation. With that, I will conclude this short demo. In the next demos, we will also show a more deeper dive into test automation using the IDEs themselves. And with that, we will conclude the Tech Talk. Thank you for being with us.